and welcome to a new episode of What to Think with me, Dylan Tweeney, and...
Jordan Novett.
That was your cue. Well done, Jordan. We are from VentureBeat, the technology news site, and we're here to tell you a little bit about the top tech news of the week. And after that, we're going to be joined by Jay Nath, the Chief Innovation Officer for the city of San Francisco. But first, let's talk about the top headlines. Really, the top headline this week, I think, is we can't talk very much about, which is Amazon's big event, smartphone launch, we think, on Wednesday morning. But as we are recording this, it is only Tuesday afternoon, so we do not, in fact, know anything about it. And by the time you'll be listening to it, we'll know everything. So just go to VentureBeat.com and search for Amazon, and you'll get all the details.
Yes.
So I'm going to pick some other headlines from the past few days that we can talk about. I will say this. One of the top stories on VentureBeat this week has been a story about a French engineering school called École 42, or if you're going to be in... be all French about École 42. French listeners have now just turned off our podcast because I butchered their language, but it means School 42. It is a school that has no teachers, no textbooks, no real curriculum, and no tuition.
How do you know about this place?
I was in Paris last week.
Oh, and what did you see?
I saw all kinds of things. I met a bunch of tech startups. I talked to some VCs, American and French VCs, about the startup ecosystem in France. Mm-hmm. And I was invited with a bunch of other people to the Élysée, which is like the French White House.
Very nice.
Only it has much fancier tapestries and a lot more gilt in the ceilings and things like that. Fancier chandeliers. And so, we met the president and we heard him speak some platitudes about French tech. Most of all, I was just kind of impressed by, the state of the French tech ecosystem. I think it's a lot healthier than people outside France think it is.
How prominent is this school in this view that you have about the French tech scene?
Well, so École 42 is interesting because it's in its first year right now. Mm-hmm. And it was started by a 70 million euro donation from this French entrepreneur named Xavier Niel. And he's the guy who started an ISP in France called Free. So he donated a huge pile of money to start this school. And they invited anyone who wanted to take the admissions test, which was basically a game that you played online. 70,000 people took the test. Only 20,000 of them were able to finish. Mm-hmm. Of those 20,000, they took the 4,000 with the best scores and invited them to Paris to spend 4 weeks basically doing intensive coding, like 100 hours a week.
So let me just actually pause you there and say, this must have been a hell of a game, because to cut down on the number of people who can actually go there, that would be pretty hard. I mean, what kind of a game is this?
I didn't see it actually, so I don't know. It's a sort of problem-solving game, the sort of thing where they tell you or they show you something, and you have to figure out what the rules are. You don't even know what the rules are. You kind of have to figure out what you're supposed to do.
I think I would just have fun doing that game, but okay.
You probably would. You seem like the kind of person who would do well at that sort of game.
Maybe.
A clever boy. Whereas Jolie, who's not here, I'm not sure how she would have fared.
She might have just said, you know what, I'm done with this.
This is a waste of time, it's a stupid game. Yeah. That might be one reason why École 42, its student body, is only about 11% female, because maybe women don't have the patience for that kind of admissions quote-unquote test. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, of the 4,000 people that they invited to take this test, they picked about 900 to actually join the school. So their acceptance rate is something like around 1%.
Isn't that like better than Harvard and all the other Ivy League schools?
Yeah.
We think they're so... Okay.
So then the idea of the school is they're going to spend the next 2 to 3 years, each class. These guys are going to just sit there. They give them problems. They say, okay, your job this week is to create a ray tracer or create a 3D model of the, Castle Wolfenstein dungeon.
Cool.
And these guys who, in some cases, they haven't finished high school, they haven't even touched a computer until like 6 months ago. They just have to go out onto Google and figure out how to do it in these teams.
So there's no educational material. They just use the internet.
Nothing. Yep. No teachers, nothing. They just work with each other in groups of, 2 to 5 people.
Is there some kind of graduation rate or any way to, figure out if these people are learning what they're supposed to be learning?
They take tests. Okay. And if they pass the test, it's essentially pass-fail. If they pass the test, then they continue. If they don't pass, then they have to keep going until they get it, I guess.
Very interesting model.
It is. It's very interesting. So it's set up that, in 2 to 3 years, these guys will graduate. They'll be incredibly qualified programmers and software engineers. And they will have lots of experience, like very practical experience solving problems and coding specific things. And they're going to churn out 800 to 1,000 of these kids every year.
Are these people getting jobs yet?
No, because it's too soon. They've only done 1 year so far.
Okay.
But I think they said something like 20% of the students are already starting companies while they're in school.
All right. This is going to be one to watch, it sounds like.
They're highly motivated, yeah.
Very interesting. Probably way better than like Coursera.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just competitive, it's intense. It's way better than any MOOC, I think, in terms of motivating you, because you're actually there at the school with a bunch of other people.
Wow.
So we'll see. I was very excited. That was the coolest thing I saw in France, apart from, the Eiffel Tower and all the usual stuff. Definitely bears watching, particularly for computer education.
And wait, by the way, is this model going to emerge in the United States anytime soon?
Apparently, they've had some interest from schools like MIT.
Wow.
And some schools in China.
Imagine
so
that.
They
MIT
might
would be
syndicate
like,
it.
We're not going to give you a syllabus. You're going to have to learn on your own, and we're going to test you.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic.
Wow.
I mean, I don't think you could learn everything that way. You couldn't study philosophy that way necessarily. You couldn't become a well-rounded person that way. But if you want to learn how to be a great engineer, that might be a fantastic way to do it. Because all that information is out there on the internet. You just need to be motivated to go teach yourself.
I guess we'll have to see, the success rate of these people coming out of the first few batches.
Absolutely. It will have to be proven. So let's talk about another headline, Tesla. Do you want to take this one, Jordan?
Yeah. So we had thought at some point Elon Musk was going to come out and say there would be certain kinds of patents that Tesla would open up about for batteries. And what ended up happening on June 12th was astounding in the sense that we were completely wrong on that little part about what patents Elon Musk was talking about. It was actually all his freaking patents.
Exactly.
And he said, you know what? The way that he described that front in this cutesy way was we're taking these patents, hanging up on the walls, off our walls, and we're not going to, start lawsuits whenever people infringe on our patents.
Now, they're not exactly giving up their patents. They're not open sourcing everything.
No, they're not.
He's just saying, okay, use our patents, and we pinky promise that we're not going to sue you.
And actually, this does have some precedent. I remember this little thing called Ethernet, and there was something pretty similar. Actually, I was talking with Doc Searles, who pointed to a few other technologies that followed this same model. People were thinking this is the first ever. Actually, it wasn't that big of a deal in terms of what he was saying, but rather for his market, it is pretty astounding. So it would be interesting to see the kinds of innovations that will come out, that'll come out of the American automakers and even foreign. If we're going to see more electric cars, I don't know, but it would be cool to see more people thinking about doing that more.
It's an interesting point of view that you can actually build a bigger market if you give away the standard, right? Or some of the patents, like Ethernet, which obviously now is completely dominant.
Yeah. And I think Xerox PARC also had some similar interest in sharing with other people, the kinds of things that it originally had patented.
That's a new way of thinking for the car industry, though, for sure. I will pour a little cold water on this idea, though, and note that Tesla has had partnerships, for instance, with Toyota to produce things. I think they were doing maybe the battery system for the electric RAV4, and Toyota has discontinued that partnership. So it might be that Elon thinks higher of his technology than the rest of he thinks more highly of his technology than the rest of the auto industry does. So maybe it's easy for him to give it away.
Now, here's what I want to know. Does his view on patents extend to space? And by that, I mean all his crazy SpaceX stuff. Is that going to become, open for anyone to copy as well?
Interesting. Or
I want to go to space too, but I don't want to pay as much as people are maybe having to pay. If
you want an open source trip to space. Okay. Jordan is going to take the open source Linux powered rocket to space. It's going to be very uncomfortable. It might blow up halfway up there, but it will be free.
All in the name of innovation.
Okay, Jordan, I'm glad you volunteered for that job because I'm not taking that trip. Let's talk about one more very important tech headline. One of the highlights of the week, I think, was the release of a new the announcement of a new version of Pencil.
Why is this important?
It's not really important. So Pencil, for those of you who don't know, is a $60 iPad stylus. And it looks just like a carpenter's pencil, except it works with your iPad. And it comes from this company called 53, which also make an app called Paper.
Right, I've heard of that.
Which is just like drawing on paper, except it's on your iPad. And the new version of the pencil, when it comes out with iOS 8, will support pressure sensitivity. So you can take the little wedge tip of the pencil and lay it down kind of flat, and you can do broad, brushy strokes, or you can use just the tip and do like fine little light strokes. It's just like using a friggin' pencil.
Okay. Well, you know what? It sounds like it's a stupid little thing, but who knows? Maybe 53 is going to, hit it big because their stylus pencil actually seems like a real pencil. What about this whole book thing that they also do? Let me just bring that up.
Okay, so these people drive me nuts. Their three biggest products are pencil, paper, and book. Okay, so pencil, for $60, you can buy their pencil, and you can draw on your iPad using their paper app. Now, thank God the paper app is free, but you do need a $500-$600 iPad to use the paper app.
Right.
Okay, so you're using a $60 pencil on your $600 notebook paper. And once you've created some drawings that you really like, if you want to share those drawings with the world, you think like, oh man, if only I could print these on something and have them on paper. You can send the drawings off to 53 and they will print them into a product that they call Book, which looks just like the Moleskine that you would have drawn them in a previous century, only it's printed drawings from paper that you did with your pencil. And the book costs $40.
This company might secretly want to bring things back to 2007 before the iPad came out. And then they want to really give you paper, which supposedly everyone wants to get rid of, but actually you could make money on it if these people
so
were
annoying.
Right.
Just buy the friggin' $15 notebook.
And a pencil.
And a pencil for like 10 cents or a really fancy pencil set for a couple dollars and sketch.
Now, have you
notebook.
Used one of these, by the way?
What, a Moleskine and a pencil?
A
yes,
53
all the time.
stylus.
No, I can't be bothered.
It might be nice. I'd try it.
I'm sure that for people who like to draw on their iPads, there are all kinds of advantages to this. And I'm sure that David Hockney, who draws and paints on an iPad, I'm sure he can create great art with it, and I will eat my words. But you know what? For me, maybe it's just the company's marketing that they just call it paper and book. Maybe that's what irritates me.
Well, I at least can say that a lot of people have been reading this. So my bet is that this will catch on with a certain class of people.
So yes, you'll see many more obnoxious hipsters drinking their $4 espressos and their $4 toasts, drawing with their $60 styluses on their iPads.
Called, quote unquote, pencils and paper. And books.
Exactly. Okay. I'm glad I got that out of my system. We're going to talk to Jay Nath from the city of San Francisco in just a minute. But first, a little quick thank you to our host and sponsor, New Relic, which is a software analytics company that makes sense of billions of metrics across millions of web and mobile apps. New Relic, they say, helps the people who build modern software understand the stories that their data is trying to tell them. When software breaks, everybody loses. So New Relic helps out with that by improving performance, reliability, delivering a better experience for users. And they support PHP, Python, Ruby, Java, .NET, Node, iOS, and Android apps, including, perhaps, for all I know, Paper. Well, now let's welcome our guest. Jay Nath is the Chief Innovation Officer for the city of San Francisco. Welcome, Jay.
Hi, this is Jay.
Hey, good to have you here.
Thank you, Dylan.
So you were the first Chief Innovation Officer for the city of San Francisco since January of 2012, and maybe the first urban Chief Innovation Officer in the country. What does that mean? What do you actually do for the city?
Well, just to give you a little bit of history, so the position was created in January 2012, and as you mentioned, the first in San Francisco history. And our mayor saw the need for a position like this. And since then, there's been about 24 or so positions created like this across the country. So my role is really broad. If you think about public service and government, it's unlike any other organization, private sector organization. We manage an airport, we manage a zoo, and services in between, right?
Two very fun institutions.
That's
yes.
right. Favorite institutions. And so one of the great things about my role is that I have the flexibility and ability to work with so many different partners externally and internally on very different topics. But the way that we sort of look at ourselves is very much a bridge with the broader community, the entrepreneurial community, with our creative class. And the idea is, how do we institutionalize some methodologies like lean startup, or how do we think about grabbing ideas and capacities from the broader community and use that to solve challenges that we're facing in government.
Okay, so you might be talking to the lean startup guys in Silicon Valley and San Francisco and try to get some of those ideas and use them to actually make government work in a more efficient, responsive, iterative kind of way.
Exactly. I think our default is very much a waterfall, very much building Taj Mahal type, approach, when we should be thinking very differently. And, I really like the idea of bootstrapping ideas and getting some traction.
Give me an example. Like, has the city created a minimum viable product for anything and gotten response on that?
MVP.
Yeah.
So I think our office really likes to think of incubating ideas. And so I'll give you an example or two. So one is, how do we help businesses manage and get through the red tape of starting a business, all the regulatory hurdles, et cetera. There's a huge number of permits. And so right now, or actually previously, you had to go through 15 different sites and navigate through that process. And what we did is we worked with a startup in Santa Monica.
Which one?
It got purchased. I am forgetting it, but I will recall shortly.
We'll add it to the webpage.
Intuit. And the idea was, how do we do something, the minimum viable product, very quickly? And they were able to help us put together 200 plus permits locally, state, and federal. And we were able to prove that, hey, this is a very big step forward, and we're now investing in a more complete solution. So that was very much a prototype or first step, and I would say an MVP. Yeah.
How often do you actually work with startups to bring new technology into the city's technological stack? Do you have any insight into how often that happens?
Well, we're a very large organization, so there's interactions happening that I'm probably not aware of. But one of the things that we have developed is a structured program to interact with startups called Entrepreneurship in Residence program. And the idea behind that program is, we as government are facing all of these challenges around transportation, healthcare, public safety, and we need the best and brightest minds and ideas to solve those challenges. And so we looked in our own backyard, entrepreneurs, and said, hey, can we tap into this community to solve those challenges? And when we had discussions with them, on one hand, they were very excited, right? They know it's a huge commercial opportunity. Just some facts here. It's about $150 billion market just for IT alone nationally. We, in San Francisco, spend tens of millions of dollars on technology. And yet, on the other hand, they don't know how to navigate through that process. Who do they talk to? The RFP process is really complex, et cetera. So the idea of this program was to bridge that gap. And so we had a process where we shared some of our pain points with the broader community and invited startups to apply for a 16-week residency program. And we had nearly 200 startups apply for this program from 25 different cities and countries, and just a tremendous caliber.
These are startups who are interested in maybe working with the city of San Francisco and want a residency to kind of handhold them and help them learn the ins and outs.
Yeah, and really to get product market fit. So they might have a product that is an adjacent market. And
he really does talk like a lean startup guy, doesn't he?
I have a hard time imagining that the city of San Francisco would help startups be able to find product market fit, except where there's like a database of business permits. I mean, is it just a matter of plugging in services that every big medium-sized city would use in order to get that, or how do you actually bring what the city knows and make it really useful for a 3-person startup?
Well, I think they're looking at this as a commercial opportunity, a way to engage with government to better understand those pain points. Often those pain points are opaque, right? As a citizen, you experience things on the interface, right? Things like the bus being late, but you don't see all of the value chain behind it, the supply chain issues, maybe the personnel management challenges, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really sort of opening up our doors and giving them that deep insight. And so through that 16 weeks, they have an opportunity to take a look at their product and look at the challenge that they're facing and see what tweaks that they need to make. And they'll maybe conduct a pilot or two, get some data and some feedback, and iterate and improve their product to try to address that challenge.
That's cool. Who won?
Yeah. So out of the nearly 200, we selected 6, and they're across various parts of government. Some are in healthcare, some are in sort of urban planning. So one of them is called Birdie, and they basically make a hardware product that is a smart air monitoring device. It's much more than a air pollution a smoke detection device. It does that, but it also monitors CO2 like many other devices, but it also monitors VOC and other air pollutants. And it's connected, so it can let you know when there's issues, and it can also make suggestions about changes you may want to make, like opening the window to improve circulation.
Or closing the window, depending on
where you live, right?
what the day is,
and in the smog outside, absolutely. So they're working with our Department of Public Health on running an experiment, and to see if in this experiment, if people will actually change their behavior with information and data.
It's really encouraging to me to hear you talking about the interface of government, because I think that's language that we in the technology business really understand. Like, a company has an interface with its consumers, and that's expressed through a website or an app or something like that. But government doesn't typically think of that. You think of a government interface as being, bulletproof plexiglass and a countertop or something, right? So that's really encouraging. And I think some of the governments that have done a really good job of encouraging entrepreneurship have made a point of making that interface as easy to work with as possible. I mean, Singapore, I'm thinking of, for example, has they're always talking about how easy it is to start a company. Like, there's an online form you can fill out, and in one day, in a couple hours, you just do this thing online, and your company is registered and you're licensed to do business in Singapore.
And I think the way that we're thinking about the interface is really, how do we enroll the entrepreneurial community, civic hackers, et cetera, to help us build those interfaces, not necessarily us doing all the work all the time. And so if you think about the business permit, and if you think about taxes, for example, Intuit has done a great job. And it's because the IRS has opened up their systems to allow for feedback and data input and export. We've actually developed an API called Open 3-in-1 API. That's a read-write API. And the idea behind that is, if people are going to build mobile solutions that interact with their city, that's not necessarily going to come from City Hall. We want developers to be able to build those products and think about, how best to create that experience, and really be able to interact with us on a technology basis, but for them to really own that experience side of things.
Let's talk about data. I'm really interested in talking about open data, because I know this has been part of your charter, and open data in government has really come to the fore in the last couple of years, thanks to the Obama administration's data.gov and their efforts to open up vast troves of federal government data. So what's San Francisco doing in that arena?
Well, when we saw data.gov, we were really inspired. It made a lot of sense for us to try to replicate that here locally. And so we were very much one of the pioneers and started that effort about 5 years ago. And we went, I would say, in terms of government speed, about 3 months from idea to actually go to market.
That actually beats some public companies.
And so what we did was we actually used open source software to bypass the procurement process, so we didn't have to deal with bureaucracy. And we had some existing data sets that we put up there, and we made a rallying cry. Former Mayor Gavin Newsom issued an executive directive to really support open data, and it's really evolved since then. We were ranked number 1 in the country by a set of nonprofits around open data, and we recently hired a chief data officer. Again, one of the first in the country to do that.
And what does he actually do?
It's a she, and she is charged with really looking at all of the assets that we have as a city from a data perspective, and we're creating a registry of all those different data assets and resources. Because one of the things that we found out talking to our constituents is when we'd ask them, hey, what data would you like to see? They would ask us, well, what do you have? And
right.
we wouldn't know the answer to that question. So I think one of the first steps that we're taking is building out that sort of listing and database of databases.
And is that something that's publicly referenceable?
That will be. So we're about to kick that process off. It's going to be more difficult for the larger departments, and for the smaller agencies, fairly straightforward. And so hopefully we'll have that out shortly in a very public way, and maybe an API to access that information as well. And the other thing that we're doing is we're trying to have openness as the default. So when we're buying new technology, we want to ensure that that technology has some sort of public interface, an API or some way to get to that data. We don't want to be held hostage by vendors who will charge us to access data, which is really, the public's right to access that information.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah, so from that, we've seen a lot of applications and services. We've even seen art being created with municipal data. So it's just really amazing just how people have used this as a generative platform to create new solutions and art, and just it's been really tremendous.
I actually would want to come back and ask you, sure, you have a chief data officer, but do you have a data scientist?
We don't have a data scientist, and I think that's a sort of a level of maturity we want to work towards, is thinking about, okay, what are our resources and assets that we have? How do we improve sharing of those assets, both with the public and internally? Mm-hmm. And then, thinking about how do we better utilize that information to make decisions, whether it's real-time or predictive analytics. One of the great things is we leverage we partner with a lot of different organizations. Splunk has a Splunk for Good. They've worked with our city. There's a new nonprofit called Bay's Impact that is a group of data scientists that started here in San Francisco recently. And their mission is to bring data scientists to solve civic and social issues. So we're looking at how do we tap into that expertise. We're not going to necessarily be able to bring that into government, especially with the sort of war for talent around data scientists. Mm-hmm. But I think people naturally find transportation and healthcare data really fascinating, and they want to, they live in our city and they want to make a difference.
And then in the presumption of openness, what are the sorts of problems that a data scientist might be able to work on for the city?
I think it could be really anything. If you think about transportation, we rely upon a vendor, next bus, to sort of estimate when that bus is going to arrive.
Right.
So we have no insight into that algorithm, right? And so wouldn't it be interesting if we were able to bring other eyes and minds to that problem and see if we can improve that problem?
Very cool.
Yeah, so I think, it's not sort of looking at, and there's other resources like Kaggle and many others that we can leverage, but I think it's also a culture shift. I think, within city government, we're accustomed to either doing the work ourselves or hiring consultants to do the work. And now it's saying, hey, we have this tremendous natural resource, our community, that can help us. Yes. And so how do we structure that in a way that creates value on both sides?
That is a remarkably different way of thinking about government assets.
Yeah.
You can allow them to be developed by other people. For the common benefit or for private benefit or what have you, but it's the public's data, right?
That's right. And when we first launched Open Data, people said, well, we usually sell this data. You're taking away this revenue, and we had this debate about short-term revenue and broader public benefit, and even actually having greater revenue coming in from companies being started and generating tax revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we've been able to shift that discussion. As an example, we used to sell our business registration data, all the businesses that are here in San Francisco, to marketing firms, et cetera, 6 figures. And when I initially had that discussion with our tax collector, they weren't really, they didn't really want to share that information more publicly. 2 years later, they saw the light and they started sharing that information.
How did they see the light? What did you tell them?
Some additional source of revenue?
There was no forcing. There's no pressure. It was really, I think, from their standpoint, they saw that this was a broader movement happening within our city and nationally and internationally. And I think they had a realization on their own.
Nice. Well, you mentioned transportation a couple times, and I want to ask in the 5 or so minutes that we have left. To what extent is transportation innovation something that you think about and something that you work on? Because there is a lot going on in transportation in this city, whether we're talking about, alternatives to cab service and the disputes over that. I know it's not controversial, right? As well as, the Google bus, and that's also controversial in its own right.
Or even the Google boat.
Yes.
first of all, I think, the fact that we are seeing all of this effort around changing transportation speaks to the need and the passion that people have around transportation. And clearly, we need more solutions, right? And so if you look at Uber and companies like that, I think they're providing a really great service. I think the question is, how do you ensure safety, equitability, and all of those questions that have been sort of built over time around the taxi industry? How do you take the best of those principles and apply that to the space, which is, some would consider the wild, wild west. I don't think it's necessarily in that state. There's trust mechanisms built into the platform, and there's, they have a self-interest to ensure that they're providing services safely. But I think there's a responsibility of government to ensure that the regulatory environment is structured in such a way to ensure safety and things like that. So it's sort of navigating that process, which sometimes can take a while. And of course, there's other interests that want the status quo to be in place. One of the things that I've been thinking about, going back to data and transportation, is the fact that our taxi companies don't have sort of these mobile apps, right? There's some companies like Flywheel.
There are some apps out there.
There are apps.
Right.
But the problem with that is that the market's fragmented, right? So these apps are not looking at the full inventory of cabs. And I think there might be a role where government could actually ensure that data of where those taxis are and the status of those taxis, whether they have a person in their cab or not, is freely available to anyone. And so, Flywheel could then take that data and they would have a complete picture of taxis all over our city. Or a new startup or a new company could do that as well.
And that would be free data.
That would be open data and free without restrictions.
Well, it probably wouldn't be free after whatever service it was, whatever company it was, got its hands on it.
Right. But
They'd be happy to resell it, but yes, it would be free to them.
A lot of different ways to monetize, right? If you look at transportation data that we have now in our public buses and transportation, some entrepreneurs charge in the App Store. Some are giving away for free because it's something that they want to contribute to society. So I think the motivations are different, whether they're altruistic or commercial interests for pursuing that. And I think taxis are another great example where we have the technology. Let's start sharing that information and make it more available.
Is there something that you can learn, though, from this concept of charging more, and then if there are people who really want that cab, they can pay more money? Is that something that gets through to the kind of position that you sit in, this kind of public-private partnerships are awesome kind of thing? Wow, wouldn't it be great if we can charge more money and get more revenue?
Yeah, I think the challenge with that is that we need to make sure that the grandmother, can use these services, or people in disadvantaged communities. So I think there's that question about equitability, making sure that the pricing is fair and that you're not sort of equitability, I think, is a core of it.
Well, there's also the argument, too, that the government has a role to play in ensuring that we continue to develop services that are available for everybody, right? So that Uber is not a replacement for Muni, right?
Absolutely.
Whereas many people, I think in the tech community would much rather take an Uber than a Muni because it's more convenient. They don't have to be around all these other people. It comes when they want, and they have the money to pay for it. But there are a lot of people who, for whom Muni still needs to be an essential part of the infrastructure.
And we need to ensure the safety, so ensuring that the drivers are licensed properly, that the insurance is in place properly. All of those things need to be thought of as well. So you're right, equitability is not necessarily something the private sector needs to worry about.
Yeah. That does also put some limits on your ability to do MVPs too, by the way, because in the private sector, an MVP can be buggy, it can not work, and it can have all kinds of problems. And if it doesn't work, no big deal. No one will use it. But in the government, I think bugginess or inequitability or maybe slightly more
and you're
tricky
using
issues.
Taxpayer dollars.
Yes,
so
that's right.
You're very much a steward, and you have to be very aware of that. So I think the level of experimentation in government broadly is very low, just because of those sort of constraints and pressures. So, how do you create mechanisms where you can do risk aggregation and sort of have an R&D lab, right, where you can actually take some risk?
If you want to have that position, though, I just have to ask, how do you get to work every day?
I bike 90% of the day, 90% of the time from the sunset.
Good. All right.
Do you ever take Uber?
I take Lyft. I usually use more of the peer-to-peer.
Okay.
I haven't tried UberX yet. So.
I'm a bike riding hippie. I take Caltrain up and I bike everywhere.
I biked here.
Okay.
Right on.
In a suit, yeah.
Okay, so I want to hear about innovation around bike riding in this city. What do you got, Jay?
I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space as you think about.
Wow.
If you think about smart cities and you think about connected cities, having devices where people can actually know if the bike is stolen. I think as a city, how do we enable those connectivity services, whether they're narrowband or broadband services, so that again we're creating a platform for entrepreneurs and individuals to create solutions on top of that. So very much a platform play.
Okay. Well, we're just about out of time, so I think we're going to wrap it up. Jay, I want to commend you on your efforts to make the city of San Francisco far more buzzword compliant. MVP and product market fit. Platform and interface are words that I'm not sure I've heard from government officials before, so well done.
I haven't heard Newsom before, have you?
Well, a little bit. Yeah, he does use that somewhat. Yeah. So I want to tell people if they're interested in learning more about this, they can go to innovatesf.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To find out more about what Jay and his colleagues at the City of San Francisco are working on. So,
thanks
Jay
for the opportunity to share some of the work we're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming, Jay.
Absolutely.
Let me just pause to thank our sponsor and our host, New Relic. Thanks again to them, and thank you, readers, for joining us on What to Think. We'll see you online at VentureBeat.com. Until next week, I'm Dylan Tweeney.
And I'm Jordan Ovett.
Catch you later.